honeybees, my name is Raven, this is October, that's Jasper, and welcome back to our channel! Subscribe to become part of the hive. Be sure to like and ring the notification bell. Thanks, honeybees! Enjoy the video. Meow! Yay. Okay. Bye, I love you. Alright, so today I'm going to talk about two comedies that I saw recently. Well, one is like the horror comedy, so it's still kind of like horror, you know, but it has some comedy in it, and then one is just like a straight up comedy. And I saw both of them recently, and I don't have too much to say about either of them, honestly, but I feel like whenever I talk about movies, it's just like the like biggest movie like of the month or whatever it is, but actually I see like new releases like pretty much every week, sometimes twice a week, and I never really talk about a lot of them just because usually I don't have a whole lot to say, you know. Like I'll post a short little review on TikTok or Instagram and that's it, but I kind of want to be like more up to date on like the actual new releases like on my channel. So the first one I saw a couple weeks ago, right when it came out, was The Blackening.
A reunion about to crack. We got the whole crew back.
Really, bitch? A cabin in the woods?
Now let's get it all in perspective.
Oh, hell no.
Where are you going?
Look for the fuse box.
What kind of house is this?
So I wanted to see this movie because the trailer made it look really funny. Seemed very meta, which I like in horror movies a lot. You know, Scream is very meta, but it's always started that way. And if you want to know my opinions on Scream, I have a video where I talk about all of those movies. But other horror movies have been kind of doing that lately too, since like Cabin in the Woods, which wasn't even the first to do it, obviously. There's a lot. And I always kind of liked that style. I like whenever any certain genre can kind of like comment on itself and make fun of itself while still fitting into that genre. And The Blackening kind of does that. How like black people always like tend to like die first in horror movies, at least like older horror movies, because like nowadays it's a little bit different. They're a little more diverse in more recent years, which is great. But in a lot of like, you know, big horror movies and horror movies like before the past like decade or two, black person was in it, they would either die first, or if they didn't, they wouldn't make it to the end of the film anyway, so they would always die, you know? A black person was never like the final girl or guy until like more recent years. So that's kind of what The Blackening is commenting on, how horror has kind of mistreated people of color, but specifically black people, because that's just what this film centers around. So I'll just start by getting into what The Blackening like is about, just kind of go through the story and then kind of share my thoughts on it. So The Blackening is about a group of friends from college. It's been like, I believe like 10 years since they've graduated college, maybe more, but around there. This like group of friends who hung out a lot in college celebrating Juneteenth at a cabin in the woods. So one couple in the group, Morgan and Sean played by Jay Farrow, rented this cabin for all their friends to celebrate the weekend of Juneteenth together, and they get there first and they're like setting up and talking about their friends and whatever, and they find this game room and they go in there and they see this game set in the middle of the room called The Blackening, and they open it up out of curiosity because they hadn't heard of this game before. There's like this racist caricature in the middle of it that's like talking to them and like telling them how to play the game, and so like all the doors slam and they think it's a joke, but no, it's real. It's like asking them like black media related questions. They like are on a timer and they don't answer one of the questions in time because they're kind of questioning if it's even real. And Sean, the guy, ends up getting killed. I think he gets like an arrow to the neck. It's hard to remember each individual death, but a lot of them have to do with arrows. And then Morgan, the woman, ends up getting captured. And so that's like the opening scene. Very like, you know, traditional style opening scene to a horror movie. Usually your opener has characters going through what the rest of the characters in the movie are going to go through, you know. So traditional horror stuff, you know, we have our opening kill. Starting off strong, and then we cut to like all the other friends, this group of friends. We have Lisa and Allison and their friend Dwayne all riding up in one car together. Dwayne is like the gay friend, and he's like very protective specifically of Lisa, because her like ex-boyfriend, who was also their friend, is going. Dwayne doesn't know that at first, and he finds out later, and it's this whole thing. Allison is mixed race. Her dad is white, and that becomes important later in the movie, but they're all black. Allison is mixed race, black and white. When they get to the house, their other friend King is there, And so is Namdi, who is Lisa's ex-boyfriend. They broke up because he cheated on her, and this makes Dwayne very upset because he's very protective over Lisa, like I mentioned. And so we already have a little bit of tension, a little bit of drama within the group when they arrive. So those characters are there, all 5 of them. And then another character, Shanika, stops at a gas station on her way, and we see her run into another character, Clifton, who's like the really nerdy character. And she's kind of like creeped out by like the white gas station guy kind of following them around. And she ends up giving Clifton a ride because they all knew each other. And they're both invited. So all 7 of them get to the cabin. And I forgot to mention when the first 5 of them are there, they run into this ranger played by Diedrich Bader. His name is Ranger White. No subtlety there. He is a white man. Questioning if they had permission to be there because the owners of the cabin, it's like an Airbnb situation, don't usually rent to, he says like, they don't usually rent to, and they cut him off black people, and he's like, they usually rent to families, and you guys are all adults. But of course there's like the racial implications there, and he's kind of set up as like maybe he could be a villain, but he leaves, and so they all start partying. Morgan and Sean are not there, but they kind of assume like they went out to get more stuff and they'll see them later tonight, so they start like drinking. And part of what comes up is they all kind of question like who specifically invited Clifton, because none of them had seen him since college. They'd all met up a few times since college and had like various like Juneteenth celebrations and other celebrations as well, but Clifton was never there, so they're kind of like, who invited you? And then it kind of goes into like making fun of him because they're playing a specific card game that like he doesn't know how to play, and he's just kind of like the brunt of the jokes. He's like the friend who like none of them are actually friends with. He just happened to be in the group somehow in college. After a while, and they're kind of questioning like, where are Morgan and Sean? They're the people that rented this place. They go to find the game room where before it was locked, and then they go to it again and it's unlocked, and they find that same game, the Blackening. And there's this whole sequence of them playing the game, and the little character on the game board is seemingly sentient because he is like addressing them by name and asking them like very specific questions and telling them like, you have to play or you'll die. And basically they go through multiple rounds. I believe they have to answer like 10 questions of like black media related things. So asking about like black sitcoms, like Family Matters, and other sort of like horror movie related things, like black actors and actresses who have been in certain horror movies. One of the previous questions from the opening scene was like, name a black actor who has survived a horror movie, and they didn't answer that one, so that's why they lost. And then so they're answering question after question, and they're getting them all right. They're all working together, right? And it's actually like a pretty cool sequence. I like that one. I like trivia. I like media, and I was trying to like think of the answers myself, so that part was fun. And then they get to the question, like, name, I don't know if it's like 5 or 10 black actors who have been in Friends, like who have appeared in Friends as like a cameo. And they one by one are like, I don't really watch Friends, but I know that, Gabrielle Union was in an episode. I don't really watch Friends, but I remember that this person was in an episode. And the person who played the original Aunt Viv, which was another question, like, who was the darker skinned Aunt Viv and at what season was she replaced in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? So questions like that, you get it. So they answer the question and they come up with the correct amount of black people who have done cameos in Friends, only to lose that question because the board is like, no, the correct answer is, I don't watch that show. Which was kind of funny because they all did kind of say that, but they each were able to think of one anyway. So they fail the question, and on the little TV screen in the room they're playing because they see that Morgan has been captured and she's like tied up to a chair on the little TV screen, and there's like the killer guy in a racist caricature mask resembling the caricature on the board, and so he's like, you gotta answer all these questions or Morgan dies. So they fail the question. Morgan gets attacked. We don't actually see her death, but it's implied that she was caught when they notice that like she's in the basement, and they try to like break her out of the basement, only for the killer to come and like attack them, and King gets stabbed. And then when he tries to take the arrow out of himself, he ends up stabbing Allison, and it's like this whole thing. But we don't see Morgan again after this, and at the end they do say that she dies, so Morgan was killed over them not being able to answer this question correctly in the game's version of what is correct. Then comes like the part that's in all the trailers where the game tells them like normally the black person dies first in a horror movie, so you all have to determine who was blackest among you, and that person dies. If you don't answer, everybody dies.
In your predicament, the black character is always the first to die. I will spare your lives if you sacrifice the person you deem the blackest.
The blackest?
Nobody should judge anybody in here, bro.
You have 2 minutes to decide.
So they all have this debate, which was probably my favorite scene in the movie, where they're debating who is the blackest and who to kind of like put up. They talk about Namdi because he's actually like from an African country, so he must be the blackest because he's actually like from Africa. They talk about pretty much each one, like Shanika says the N-word the most, so she must be the blackest.
Shanika, she say nigga the most.
Nigga.
See?
Wait.
Y'all can't pick me. I'm gay.
Oh, Allison must be the blackest because she like talks the most about like being proud of her blackness, and she has like an Africa shaped like necklace and ring. And then she comes back with the point of like, oh, because I'm mixed race, it's like up to you whether my blackness is enough. Like all the time you guys make fun of me for only being half black, and my daddy's white, and I'm too white for you, and I'm too light skinned, but now when it's convenient for you, I'm the blackest one. Like, wow, okay. And that was a good point that the movie brought up. A lot of it is about like racial issues, like racism obviously facing black people in various like areas and forms of media and in real life too, but also like between black people themselves and how they quantify blackness amongst themselves as a community. And those were all very interesting ideas. One of them being like Allison's point there. They finally decide to nominate Clifton because he reveals that he voted for Trump twice.
Clifton.
Yeah, I can prove I'm not the blackest.
Prove it.
I've never seen Friday. I voted for Trump.
What?
Twice.
And so they're like, you're a disgrace to black people, like we're gonna nominate you and you die. And they all agree to it. So Clifton goes out to confront the killer and he gets shot by an arrow, and we believe he is dead. After this happens, the group splits up. Yes, they do debate on it, like, oh, it's stupid to split up. They do anyway. So the group splits, and separately they each encounter a separate killer. Turns out there's 2 killers. One they see by a lake. Shanika is like trying to swim across while the others stay behind. I believe it's King and Allison who both have like stab wounds. King has multiple stab wounds at this point, and they're kind of like hiding. They see the killer, and they're able to overpower him and kill the killer. Meanwhile, Lisa and Namdi are together with Dwayne, and they run into Ranger White, and we get this moment of like, oh my gosh, is he actually the killer? They find a mask in his car. He claims that he found that mask, and they're all kind of hiding from him in his car because before they thought he could help. They lock him out, and then the killer comes out and kills him. And then Allison actually manages to bludgeon the other killer to death, and they all meet up again together. Allison bludgeons the other killer to death, which I believe is also in the trailer, where she's saying, why do black women gotta save everybody all the time?
Why black women gotta save everyone all the damn time?
Which is a good scene. I like that scene when she kills them. So they find out that the killers were actually twins. These white guy twins who I guess like lived in the house. And one of them was the gas station attendant that Shanika ran into earlier. So now they're all together. They're brandishing weapons. They're trying to figure out like who was behind all this, or if they like killed the problem, but it seems like somebody else set it up. So they go down into the basement and they see the body of Clifton. They think he's dead, but then he comes back to life. Turns out he was faking, and he was behind it all. And his reasoning was because like years earlier, when they were all together, they were making fun of him because he didn't know how to play like that one card game that they were playing earlier. They were questioning his blackness because he's like the nerdy character through the whole thing. He talks very different. He acts very different. He doesn't like know these certain cultural things that the rest of them know about. So like years ago, they were all together, and they're making fun of him and saying that they were going to take his black card and he's not as black as everybody else, and just kind of questioning his blackness. And he really took that to heart. That really hurt his feelings, and he drank a lot that night. He ended up getting in his car and driving and killing a woman, and he was sentenced to prison for 4 years. So when he got out, he wanted to exact his revenge. So he set up like the whole thing with the cabin, knowing that they celebrate Juneteenth. Invited himself and said that he was invited, and killed Morgan and Sean and threw their bodies down a well that's in the basement that they're in. And then he plans to kill the rest of them. They do end up overpowering him and throwing him down the well, and then the rest of them survive. And then it ends on like a funny, ironic note where they're like, are we going to call the cops? No, we're not going to call the cops. I called the fire department, and the fire department comes and sprays them all with a hose. And that's how the film ends. Lots of interesting like ideas. I understand the themes, right? I think these are like important messages and themes, trying to fit into also just like a traditional like horror comedy, because obviously there's like lots of jokes throughout it, lots of like irony, and then the horror aspect of there being like a killer, multiple killers, and like a ticking clock with like the game that they're playing, and they have to answer very quickly. And so it was like a very interesting concept. The only problem is, in my opinion, it like really was not that funny. Like some of the jokes I was like, oh, haha, you know, but they weren't like jokes that you like laugh at. They're jokes that you're like, that's true. You know what I mean? Like, and listen, obviously like this movie was not made for me, right? Like that's just stating the obvious. But I do like horror, I do like comedies, and I did understand what the movie was trying to say, and like all these like issues of like people of color in media, specifically horror. You know, it's a pattern that I've noticed over the years just being a horror fan. Like I'm aware of that stuff, and that's why I really like the idea of this and like commenting on those issues. And so it was like fine commentary. It's just like as a movie, I unfortunately was not very entertained, and I just didn't think it was that funny. I wanted to like it. The trailer made it look really funny, but the trailer had the best parts. The scene where they're like trying to choose who's the blackest, the trailer to me kind of made it seem like that was most of the movie, is deciding who is the blackest, or at least answering these trivia questions. But that's one scene. And it's the funniest scene. It's like the most entertaining scene to watch. And everything after that just kind of like goes downhill. Like the comedy and horror weren't like balance super well for me, which is a problem I have with a lot of like horror comedies. It's like they don't know how to blend the comedy and the horror. It's just like comedy scene, horror scene, comedy scene, horror scene, you know. And this blended it in a couple of different scenes, but mostly it was pretty much that pattern. You had like a comedic scene, then you had a horror scene, and so on and so forth. But really my main problem is like, I like the premise, right? I thought it was a really interesting premise. What it seemed like was that somebody thought of that premise, like a horror movie of like just black people together tackling these stereotypes of like black people in movies, and like the pattern of like the black person always dying, but who dies first when you're all black people, and like deciding the blackness and other things like that, like all the black people like media related trivia. Somebody had that idea, right, for that to happen, and then they thought of like who would be behind that after, right? Like, what if we had a movie that's like all people of color, and it's like ironic because like that person usually like dies first, but it's all and blah blah blah. Like that's a really cool idea, and they have to answer trivia, and they have to decide who's the blackest, and it's like, how do we measure blackness? What does that mean? What does that mean to each person specifically? Blah blah blah. And also like there's a killer who's like a racist, you know, obviously a racist caricature, killing all these people while they like try to prove their blackness or disprove their blackness to themselves and to each other and to the killer. And then they had to think like, well, like why would somebody be doing that? And who would that person be? So, and that just like seemed kind of like sloppy to me to have it be Clifton, because like I get what they were trying to do with, they were like, you made me question my blackness and I made these horrible decisions, but it kind of seemed like counterintuitive to the message that it was like one of their other friends who is also like plagued by these things, like this racism and these stereotypes, and he just turned back on them. So I don't know what I wanted for the villain. I guess just like if it was just the white twins who like decided to orchestrate this, it would have made more sense to me because it just seemed like they didn't really know what they wanted to do with the villain, and they wanted a twist ending, and this was like the best that they could think of. Like, what if it was one of the friends behind it the whole time, because he was like an outcast among them, right? So I don't know. It wasn't that great of a movie. I think I gave it like a 2, maybe a 2.5 out of 5, just because it's a comedy that's not funny, and it's a horror movie that's not scary, right? Regardless of message, regardless of like acting, because honestly, like the acting was good. I love the set pieces. I like that it was set in a cabin. I just love like that classic horror movie in a cabin type thing. Sometimes it is way too cliche. I didn't really feel that way with this one because it was ironic and because it was meta. The fact that it was set in a cabin worked, right? But it's just as simple as that. It's a comedy that's not funny. It's a horror where I wasn't scared at all at any point. So that's kind of all I have to say about The Blackening. The other movie I want to talk about is No Hard Feelings.
Uber driver and I don't have a car. I'm gonna lose my house.
You think I chose this?
Look at this. Need a car, date our son this summer, and bring him out of his shell before college. In exchange, we'll give you a Buick Regal. Date is in quotes. It's gotta be a joke, right?
No, have you seen these helicopter parents? I'm surprised they're not gonna fuck them themselves.
So No Hard Feelings stars Jennifer Lawrence as Maddie. She lives in Montauk, New York, which is like by the sea. Rich people are kind of taking over her area, and like very early on in the movie, she's like resenting all these like rich people coming in and taking up properties, and her property taxes are going up because more rich people are moving to the area, and she's having a lot of trouble like keeping up with payments on her mom's house. Her mom died, and she has the house, and it's paid off, she owns it, but you still have to pay property taxes, right? So she gets her car repossessed in the very first scene of the movie, but because she's an Uber driver, that's like a huge deal. Like, that's how she makes her money. It's the beginning of the summer. This was when she was supposed to make all her money, right? In the summer when people need to go places and like party and stuff. She also works at a bar, but it's just not enough to supplement her income. So she has to figure something out, right? And so she comes across this Craigslist ad of these parents who want to find a woman, preferably in her early to mid-20s, to date their son for the summer and bring him out of his shell and give him these experiences before he is sent off to Princeton, because he is very sheltered. He never really leaves his room. He doesn't have any friends, has never had a girlfriend, and they're worried about sending him off away from home when he just has no sort of like social skills like that whatsoever. So she meets with the parents. Yes, she is older. Jennifer Lawrence in real life is 32. In the movie, she's 32, right? And the parents kind of like question her on that, like, you're maybe a little bit too old. And she says, well, you know, you kind of want someone with like more experience, you know, probably because you haven't found anyone yet is because you are interviewing all these young girls who can't really give your son the experience that I can, because I've been through all this. I've done all the craziness. I kind of know what he needs. And she like convinces them. So she gets the job, and she immediately gets to work trying to seduce Percy is his name, this 19-year-old kid. And as she's interpreting it at like date him, like have sex with him, like give him that experience. And that's kind of what the dad implies. The dad is played by Matthew Broderick, who is like, yeah, you know, when I went to college, like right before I went to college, I dated this woman who gave me these like unbelievable sexual experiences, and it really just set me up for college the rest of my life. And his wife is like, okay. So that's what he wants for his son, basically. So she goes on trying to seduce him. It doesn't really work at first. He's like too awkward. He thinks that she's kidnapping him, which is understandable given the scene, because she's like coming on really, really strong. Like, hey, you're so hot. Hey, let me take you home. Hey, I know where your house is. Let me put it in my, she like borrowed her friend's van. She works with these two people at a bar who's a married couple. The woman is pregnant, and the guy is like, oh, you can borrow my van for this. That's important for later. So she she ends up driving him to her house, and then he obviously like thinks like she's up to something, so he pepper sprays her, and she just explains like, no, like I just think you're hot. And he's like, really? Well, then we should go on a date. So then they kind of start dating. The whole time she's coming on so strong, dancing for him, like saying all these suggestive things, and he's just kind of like, you know, like, let's just take it slow. I'm just a romantic, I guess. So they like go to a bar and they have a date. They like spend a whole day together where they like go to an arcade and stuff like that, and just really like get to know each other and talk. Along the way, there's like a couple guys that like approach Maddie, and they're like, you know, why did you just ghost me like that? You know, did that 3 months of dating mean nothing to you? You know, guess what? Another guy who's like, oh, guess what? I'm married now. So you just like leaving me out of nowhere, like really like helped me out or whatever. So it's obvious that she's like afraid of commitment. And whenever something like gets too serious with someone, or someone maybe is about to fall in love with her, she just like dips, she just pieces out. And that's like a pattern for her. And that's why she's like where she is at this stage in her life. So anyway, we get to this part where he wants to like recreate like prom with her. So they get all dressed up. They go to a fancy dinner. There's this really great scene, probably my favorite scene in the movie, where he is playing the piano. It's introduced that he's a musician but doesn't like to play for people. So she like convinces him to get up there and play for her. And he plays a piano acoustic version of the song Man-Eater. And it's really good. He's really good. He like sings it and everything, because they had mentioned that song earlier, and he's saying, oh, it's scary. Like, watch out, here she comes. She's going to eat you. Like, oh, scary. And she's like, I don't think that's what that song is about. So he learned it because they had talked about it, and it's just like a really sweet moment.
Oh, here she comes. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes. She's a man-eater. I wouldn't if I were you. I know what she can do. She's deadly, man. She could really rip you apart. Mind over matter. Oh, the beauty's there, but a beast is in the heart.
He ends up getting upset at her because she's like jealous because some other girl like approached him, and they're both found out they're going to Princeton, and she invites him to this party, and Maddie is like, no, we're not going to go to that. But he's like, well, I'm going to go. So they go, and they have this kind of like argument in the limo about, what are we going to do when I go to Princeton? Like, I can visit on the weekends, or like you could take a train right up to me. And Maddie's kind of like, let's just not talk about that right now. Like, kind of like, hey, like, this isn't going to last that long. And he gets upset about that. So he goes to this party. She finds him there the whole time. Like, here's the thing, is there's like some controversy I've seen about people talking about this movie, like even before it came out. And I don't know if people are talking about it now that's after it's come out, just about the age gap, right? Like her being 32 and his character being 19. He's in his 20s in real life, but it doesn't matter. Like, that's like the movie, right? And I want to say, like, they don't ignore it. They address the large age gap the whole time. Like in the beginning, and the parents are like, so how old are you? And she's kind of like darting around it. They're like, how old are you right now? She's like 30. And they're like, 30? She's like 32. And they're like, no. And even Percy is kind of like, you know, you're so much older than me, blah, blah, blah. But he still says, like, you know, you're so beautiful and whatever. So he doesn't really care. But specifically when they go to this party, this like Princeton, like kids who are about to go to Princeton party, and she goes there, and everyone's like, whose mom is that? Why are you at a party with high schoolers? Like, what are you doing here? And she just like feels so out of place. And there's like funny little like millennial Gen Z moments where they're all like filming her because she said something like mildly homophobic, like as a joke, and everyone's like, say that again, oh my god, I can't believe you just said that, with the phone in her face. And she's like, oh my god, like I am too old for this. And she finds Percy, and he's like drunk and whatever, and she takes him back, and he admits that he is in love with her on their way back. And he says, you know what, I'm ready for you, I want to sleep with you. And she's like, okay. But then he's like, I'm in love with you. And she's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't do this, especially because you're drunk, you're not thinking right, let's just like not. And he's like, okay. After that happens, she's like, wow, I think this went too far, right? And it did, because she didn't mean to court him. She wanted to literally just sleep with him and then get that car from the parents, because I don't know if I mentioned that part, but for doing this, the parents are going to give her like their old car. So it's like a Dodge or something. After that whole thing happens, Percy tells his parents, I'm not going to go to Princeton. I want to stay here with my girlfriend. And obviously he doesn't know that the parents set this up. That was like a big important part of the plan. The parents are like, you're not going to tell him anything. It has to be naturally. Otherwise he's not going to get that like confidence and experience that we want him to have. He needs to think that this is just like natural. So he says he doesn't want to go to Princeton anymore because he doesn't want to leave Maddie, because Maddie is adamant about staying in Montauk. She's been there her whole life, and she's never gotten farther than New York City. And there's also this like side plot about like her dad like abandoning her when she was young, and she tried to find him and it didn't work out. But not super important, but you know, for her character development, it does kind of matter. And his parents call Maddie, and they're like, this has gone too far. Now he doesn't want to go to Princeton. We'll give you the car. You can have the car. Just convince him that he needs to keep going to Princeton. And Percy overhears this conversation, And hears Maddie say, so if I convince him to go to Princeton, I don't have to have sex with him. I can just have the car. And so he figures out the whole thing, but doesn't tell them right away. There's this funny scene where he invites her to dinner with the parents, and he's like making fun of her age the whole time, like calling her old and like all this other stuff, and just like teasing everybody, and because he's really angry. And then he's so mad that he and his friend take the car that she was supposed to get for doing this and run it into a tree in the forest, and the tree falls on it, so it's destroyed. So he comes back to his room, and Maddie's like, what's wrong? And they have sex, but they don't. He's like, let's do it, let's just do it. And she's like, okay. But he finishes before he even like does it, if you know what I mean. Like he like his part like touches her thigh, and then he's done. It's over. And that was that was a funny scene. Like all the guys in the audience laughed. It was pretty funny. So if that makes people feel any better about the age gap, they don't actually have sex. And he admits that he found out to Maddie and his parents, and he's like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Like, was any of this even real? And she's like, it was. And you know, this whole thing. And so they stop talking for a while. She does still get the car, even though it's totaled, but it's still drivable. So she's like doing Uber in this like horribly broken car that's like, she has to like tape the doors shut, and there's like plastic on it. And she saves up enough money to like fix it up, and then she saves up enough money to like pay her taxes. So she's fine now, but she still feels really bad about Percy. And Percy finally confronts his parents, how like these experiences don't matter if it's all set up by you. I'm tired of my life being controlled by you guys. So his like development of like finding that like freedom and originality and like getting out there has like a good conclusion. Like he realizes that he needs to be his own person and make his own decisions, and his life has been controlled up to this point. He doesn't want that anymore. They do end up making up, Maddie and Percy, and they decide to remain friends. And Maddie actually decides, based on like her final argument with Percy, because Percy says something along the lines of, you know, next year, years from now, you know, I'll have graduated Princeton and I'll be moving on to all these big things, and you're still going to be here. You're always just going to be here, and you're never going to leave here and like make anything of yourself. And you keep being here waiting for your like dad to apologize, and it's never going to happen. And you're just going to be in this house struggling to make your money to pay off the house forever. And she realizes that's true. She wants to keep her house because she thinks it's what her mom would have wanted, but really she realizes, like, with the help of her friends, her mom just wants her to be happy, and she's just not happy being in this same rut, you know, that she's put herself in. So she actually decides to sell her house. She sells it to her friends who work with the bar with her, who are about to have a baby because they couldn't afford to stay in New York. They were going to move. Now they can, thanks to her. And she gets to leave and live her own life outside of, you know, her parents, because really that was a theme too. She's staying where she was, and her life was being controlled by her parents in a way, right? Just like he was. Drastically different, of course, but still kind of the same thing at the end of the day. So it was really interesting how they both were able to develop out of their situations, and how similar, how like very, very different, but similar at the end of the day they were, and how they're both able to like find their independence and what they want to do, not what they think other people want them to do, right? And that was very interesting. And it ends with her driving him to Princeton because they're still friends. So yeah, and I thought it was really funny. Like it was really, I laughed like the whole time, and it was a sweet story, you know, obviously had some drama in there because a comedy can't just be jokes, right? The story has to be good too. And it was. Jennifer Lawrence's character I thought was really interesting. She was very developed. There's a scene on the beach where she gets fully nude for this movie, which was completely unexpected because the movie actually like was a bit raunchier than I expected, but in a good way. Like they really took the jokes far, but not too far, to a place that I wasn't expecting. I was kind of expecting this movie to be a lot more safe than it actually was, and I'm really happy it wasn't super safe, because then it would have been more forgettable, and it wasn't like that. I'm gonna remember this movie, right? Like it was pretty good. It was really funny. And Percy, the actor who plays Percy, he did a really good job as well, just playing this like awkward kid. He was perfect. He was perfect. And I loved Matthew Broderick as the dad. And yeah, I loved like the dialogue. I loved the message. It wasn't too heavy-handed, right? Like I was able to like understand what the characters were going through and how they were overcoming their separate issues without the movie like putting it obviously in my face. Like, you know what? I have been controlled by my parents, so I'm going to break out. Like it didn't have to be like so obvious like that, you know? You could see what was happening through just the storytelling and character actions, which I think is a sign of like really good like writing, right? And acting and directing. It all just came together very well, and I really, really like this movie. I love the set pieces as well, like Montauk, New York, like on the water was really beautiful. The houses that they used, like all the different set pieces, the bar, and just like generally being on the beach for a lot of it. I thought it was a really great setting. And yeah, that's really mostly all I have to say about No Hard Feelings. I really liked it. I feel like I don't talk about a lot of movies that I really like that come out, because I don't really have much to say other than I liked it. Right? And I could talk about like, you know, cinematography and sound and this and that, but really all of it was good. And I really liked it, and it was really funny, and I do highly recommend No Hard Feelings. I wouldn't really recommend The Blackening. If me talking about it sounded interesting to you and something like you would want to check out, go for it. I'm not saying it was a bad movie. I just didn't find it funny, and I'm probably not going to be thinking about it in a few months' time. No Hard Feelings is a movie I feel like I will definitely like revisit in the future and watch again for some laughs here and there. And I think it's like a really great addition to Jennifer Lawrence's filmography, who I was generally not really a fan of, to be honest with you, before watching this movie. Just like I haven't seen a whole lot of movies with her. The ones I've seen, like I didn't super care for. So this was nice. Like I think she really shined in this comedic role. I think she should do more comedic roles like this, because she did great. She was very like sassy, right? Anytime that one of the guys that she'd go to approaches her, she just like she just gave him such attitude, and I loved it. She is so funny. It was very witty, which I loved. And I could just like believe her as like a quick-witted comeback queen, you know what I mean? And that's just what she is in the movie. And it was really sweet. The movie did have like good, like genuine heart at the core of its story as well. So all in all, yeah, it was good, and I would recommend it for sure. I give that one a 4 out of 5. Yeah. Those are two comedies, horror comedy, that I saw recently, The Blackening and No Hard Feelings. There's like other movies that I've seen recently that like probably aren't worth talking about, and some that I am really excited to see. Let me know if you guys saw either of these movies and what you think about them, or if you're interested to, and any other movies that maybe you've seen or want to see or want me to see and talk about. Totally let me know. I'd love to hear it. That's it for now, guys. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for watching, honeybees. Make sure to like and subscribe. Bye. Meow.